Now, if you followed most democracies in Africa, where the incumbents were voted out, whether in Kenya, in Ghana in 2016, in Zambia in 2011, in Nigeria, I'd like to point out that in 2015, there are common trends or patterns. We may not have scientific evidence to back it. However, the pattern is consistent. And what are those common patterns? You may have observed that the opposition were united behind a single credible candidate. They were not fragmented. In Kenya, it was a coalition of parties, broad-based coalition. The second thing you may have observed is the fact that the opposition framed the election as a referendum on the performance of the incumbent government. That's critical. The third is that the opposition built solid grassroots structures. They were highly organized, the grassroots well mobilized, the machinery well oiled to confront the government in power that has power of patronage, footprints everywhere in the country. That was the third thing. That's the third thing that was common in all of these cases, whether in Zambia, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, and in other places where they voted out incumbents. Another thing we have observed is that they built the architecture for protection of votes. It is very common in developing world and in developing countries that the incumbent would like to manipulate the electoral process. But if you don't have that organization, that level of awareness, consciousness, mobilization to protect votes, then you can be sure that a combination of the incumbent government and the electoral machinery will skew the votes in favor of the incumbent government. And finally, so apart from the fact that the opposition were united in all these cases, and the fact that they framed the narrative as a referendum against the incumbent, they built organization. Now, even in their coalition, in all cases, they had footprints. It was not built around a single individual, or it was not ethnic-based or ideologically based. They had widespread of geographical and social footprints. They did not depend on social media. They did not depend on television appearances. It was no public show. And so if you put that, juxtapose that to the current situation in Nigeria, you will notice that the opposition is heavily fragmented. A Peter Obi commands loyalty, but I'm sure you will agree with me that it's not broad-based enough. Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar commands loyalty, has massive support, but I doubt if it is sufficient to upstage an incumbent that the incumbent will have. And so, my own argument, my thesis, is that whereas all the factors that triggers regime change are present in our landscape, it is not by itself sufficient to vote out an incumbent. I was clear in my piece that APC is currently vulnerable all the factors that trigger a call for change are present. One, the reforms may be well-intentioned. However, reforms by itself will not put food on the table, will not provide employment for the people. So the reforms is different from everyday reality of the average Nigerian. To that extent, the economy for the average Nigerian is not smiling. The economy is not about statistics. It's about our lived experience. If we progress further, we all know that we're dealing with the issue of insecurity. The average Nigerian cannot feel confident traveling from one point to the other. Now, if you leave the issue of security, look at the issue of inflation. I don't want to talk about the fact that there is heavy perception of corruption. This has totally affected the level of trust Nigerians have on their government. So we're dealing with economic crisis or cost of living crisis precisely. We're dealing with a great deal of insecurity. We're dealing with a perception of corruption. We're dealing with low trust of government. And so for the average Nigerian, of course, you know the data about high level of unemployment, our poverty rate. So for the average Nigerian, they put the blame squarely on the foot of the government. It is not about who caused it. You are elected to solve a problem. Have you solved that problem? Based on the lived reality of the average Nigerian, they don't believe you've solved the problem. And to that extent, the government appears vulnerable. And if there's any challenge the opposition is currently facing, is the fact that they're fragmented and they've put their personal ego, personal interest above national interest. And to that extent, it's challenging for them to convert the frustration of Nigerians or the anger of the people to electoral advantage. It requires a different kind of attitude and architecture to turn the frustration and the anger of the average Nigerian to electoral victory. In any case, I had made a point that if they are united on the shared purpose of removing the incumbent, what are you offering Nigerians? What's the alternative? When Nigerians won't vote for you just to remove the incumbent, what are you offering them that is better than what they currently have? You've got to come forward with a value proposition. I am not seeing that value proposition at the moment. There are two thematic issues about high level of voter apathy. The first one is that if you study the trend, gradually we have a case of declining voter turnout over the years. That is backed by statistics. But in addition to that is the fact that the average Nigerian does not trust the electoral body. And finally, if they are not offered credible alternatives, I don't think anybody will waste their time coming out to vote. So there are three issues that converge. One is that there's been declining voter apathy over time. The second factor that converge is the fact that there is no trust of the electoral body. The average Nigerian believes that the election process does not reflect the will of the people. And finally, it appears that there are no credible options on the ballot. These are the three factors converging and are predominantly responsible for the voter apathy we're experiencing. Unless something remarkable happens between now and January 2027, we may likely experience the same level of apathy. But that's not my prayer. Let the opposition put their acts together and put forward a credible front provide a credible alternative program, an alternative credible program to the current program, the current government, and let INEC. Osho is a relatively successful case or model of electoral management process. But I think that INEC owes us more. They've got a point to prove. And I challenge the INEC chairman. You have a date with history. You either write your name in gold, or, of course, you will bear the brunt of any form of insensitivity to the trust and feelings of Nigerians. So the options are there. That's my take on the issue.
Right, okay.